As an educated youth working in the countryside, I gave my chance to return to the city to my boyfriend, Kevin. He promised to come back for me, but the day after he returned to the city, I received news that he had fallen off a cliff and was lost forever. I was heartbroken but had no choice but to continue farming in the countryside. It wasn't until the college entrance examination was restored in China that I finally returned to my hometown, nearly 50 years old. But my mother was holding a woman whose appearance was completely ruined, saying with a loving expression, "Wendy, although you ruined your looks 30 years ago, fortunately, you met someone with a kind heart, allowing you and Kevin to be together. Kevin is now a respected Professor Hill. Your father is dead, and I will rely on you in the future." I was momentarily stunned. If she was Wendy, then who was I? Moreover, wasn't Kevin already dead? "Don't worry, Wendy," Kevin said, lowering his voice and occasionally noticing that many people were looking our way. "If you're willing to give your spot to me, I will definitely not let you down. But how did you get this spot in the city? Quickly compare notes with me, or else it will be a loss if we get exposed later." I stared blankly at the sickle in my hand, mechanically cutting the wheat, until Kevin noticed I was ignoring him and secretly nudged me with his arm. I finally came to my senses, looking at Kevin's young and handsome face, and a chill spread through my heart. In my past life, I was rewarded with a chance to return to the city for saving a pair of drowning twins. For scholars in this era, the most desired opportunity is to return to the city. This not only meant a chance to enjoy city life, but also the opportunity to return to school. Yet I willingly gave this opportunity to Kevin, only because he was a talented medical student before he went to the countryside for re-education, a genius student in the spotlight. Kevin promised that after returning to the city, he would focus on research and cure my father's heart disease. He also said that I was just an ordinary journalism student, and even if I returned to the city, I might not achieve greater things than he could. After a round of convincing, I wrote a letter to the organization. At that time, when I was saving someone, I was merely providing assistance. The one who actually went into the water was Kevin, and I even expressed my willingness to give my spot back to Kevin. Before discovering that Kevin was still alive, I only felt that fate was playing tricks on me. Seeing Kevin wasn't dead, I realized that perhaps he had only ever used me. Recalling what my mother said in my past life about my father's death, I couldn't help but feel my eyes redden. I later found out that Kevin went abroad to study advanced heart bypass surgery 8 years after returning to the city. But at that time, he did not perform surgery on my father. Instead, he grandly told the media, "These hands do not belong to an individual but to the country and the people. So, heart surgeries are based on a cue, regardless of personal connections." These words directly elevated him to the status of a respected doctor. But my father was forcibly taken away to die without treatment. Endless hatred spread within me. I even wanted to grab Kevin by the collar and question him why, but I couldn't. Noticing that people around were already looking this way, I still did not move. When Kevin raised his hand again, I fell to the ground with a thud, shouting, "If you're going to harvest wheat, then harvest wheat. Why are you touching my butt?" The deliberately amplified voice caused everyone to stop what they were doing. Kevin blushed, his mouth agape in disbelief. I didn't do it," he stammered. I bit my lip tightly. As a young woman, would I joke about such things? "You were the closest to me just now. Even if we usually talk a bit more, you still can't touch me like that." Just as Kevin was about to speak, a female educated youth next to me said, "Kevin and the other educated youth are always polite and humble. How could they possibly touch your butt? Stop talking nonsense." Hearing her voice, I felt as if I had been struck by lightning. Isn't this the disfigured woman who stood in front of my mother in my past life? I coldly mocked, "Before you went to the countryside, you were in the same class as Kevin, so of course you would side with him." I suddenly remembered that the woman in front of me was Kevin's cousin, Clara. In my past life, she had played matchmaker for me and Kevin several times. Not long after Kevin went missing, Clara was taken away by a wolf while gathering firewood in the mountains. At that time, I even cried for her, feeling sorry that she ended up with no remains. I never expected that she would actually impersonate someone and return to my home. Clara was left speechless and unable to argue with me. The team leader of the overseers finally walked over and said, "What's all the commotion about?" He had a serious expression and everyone quieted down a bit. To put it nicely, we were all educated youth sent to the countryside. To put it harshly, we were just here to be reformed. If anything happened during this time, we would be doomed to never return to the city for the rest of our lives. So, Clara was very eager to argue, fearing it would affect her own situation. Instead, Kevin calmly looked at the team leader. "I just saw everything clearly. Kevin didn't touch you at all. It was the tail end of the sickle used for cutting wheat that accidentally brushed against your lower back. It's all a misunderstanding." Kevin nodded without surprise and turned to do his own thing. I let out a cold laugh and said nothing. Kevin would always buy something for the captain every time he earned points. Then he would always pretend in front of me that he didn't have enough points and couldn't fill his stomach. Looking back now, he was simply using my things to do favors. After finishing work, Kevin could no longer control his emotions and pulled me into a corner when no one was watching. I thought he would lay low after this incident, but unexpectedly he said to himself, "Is it because I taught Clara to recite poetry yesterday that you're jealous and trying to get back at me?" Kevin glared at me through gritted teeth, his eyes filled with impatience. Seeing him like this, I suddenly had a different perspective. Originally, I wanted to confront him and take back what belonged to me. But now the opportunity has already been given to him. I cannot act impulsively and must plan carefully. So I looked at Kevin with a sense of grievance. "Didn't you say Clara was your classmate? Why did I hear her call you cousin? You two seem so close." Kevin showed a look of inevitability. "If you're jealous, just be jealous, but how can you say in public that I touched you? If I'm charged with molestation, I could be ruined." The laws in this old society were very strict. A look of fear flashed across Kevin's face, but he continued to talk to me. Fortunately, the situation didn't escalate. "Quickly tell me the details of how you saved that pair of twins. Once I return to the city, I'll go find them and think of a way to get you back home." His eyes were filled with brilliance, full of calculation. I suddenly realized how foolish I was in my past life, easily believing someone like him. Kevin and Clara are just children from ordinary families, but my parents are truly children of high-ranking officials, not only knowledgeable but also soldiers who have made achievements and received commendations. I fear that in my past life, Kevin became a professor in just a few short years, and my parents must have played a role in that. Every time I think of my father, who suffered from heart disease, being dragged to his death, I feel such hatred that I want to kill the man in front of me. Suppressing the hatred in my heart, I cautiously looked at Kevin. "You promised to come pick me up. You won't regret it, will you?" Kevin pressed his lips in impatience, looking at me coldly. In the past, as soon as he looked at me like this, I would immediately feel guilty and apologize, repeatedly assuring him that I would never doubt him again. But now, I still pretend that I haven't noticed anything, trembling as I shed tears. Seeing that someone was about to arrive, Kevin could only sigh and say, "How could you doubt me? I could never bear to part with you. Don't worry, in at most 2 years, I will definitely bring you back." I scoffed coldly in my heart. In my past life, I had waited in the countryside for over 20 years and still hadn't waited for him. Since he was so eager to know the details, I naturally had to tell him the details well. By the time I finished speaking, Kevin had already lost his patience to talk to me. "All right, it's late. You should go back now." I pretended to leave reluctantly, but halfway I turned back again. Bathed in moonlight, I heard the soft gasps of a woman coming from inside the house. "Kevin, I have given you everything. You must not abandon me." Kevin held his beloved woman and vowed, "Don't worry, I have only ever used you, Sarah. When I return to the city next month, you find an excuse to go up the mountain to gather firewood. I have already set the trap. At that time, I will come to pick you up. If the villagers find you missing, they will only see a pile of bones left behind by the wolves on the mountain." Clara emotionally rushed into Kevin's arms. Fortunately, my cousin is smart. Otherwise, we would have to stay in this small mountain village for a lifetime. The two became increasingly wild, and I intended to leave, but I heard Kevin repeatedly remind Clara, "When the time comes, you must use a branch to ruin your appearance." Only when you become Sarah can I be arranged to enter medical school. Clara reluctantly nodded in agreement, and I slowly smiled to myself outside the house. Early the next morning, I brought breakfast to Kevin's table. Before I could speak, Clara immediately exclaimed, "Why are you coming over? Are you trying to slander Kevin again?" Clara's voice was very loud, quickly attracting the attention of others. I looked at Kevin with grievance, hoping he could say something to help me. But Kevin coldly said, "To avoid misunderstandings, it's better for us to keep our distance from now on." The people around also began to speak. Yesterday, she said someone touched her butt, and today she inexplicably approaches him. Could it be a self-directed performance? Who doesn't know that Kevin is knowledgeable and handsome, while Sarah is average-looking and lazy? How could Kevin possibly be interested in her? Clara flashed with pride in her eyes, saying mischievously, "Forget it. As long as Sarah is willing to stay away from Kevin in the future, that would be a good deed." I trembled as I looked at Kevin. "Are you just going to watch others slander me like this?" Kevin sighed and walked in front of me, speaking in a voice only the two of us could hear. "From now on, we are people from two different worlds. Why must you cling to this so desperately?" I looked at Kevin in disbelief, appearing as if I had been used and deeply hurt. He raised his eyebrows and smirked, turning his head to say loudly, "Previously, I was willing to take care of Sarah a bit more, only because she persistently begged me for help. But after being falsely accused yesterday and going through a harrowing experience, I truly do not want to associate with such a person anymore. I hope everyone can witness this." Kevin was eager to distance himself from me, which was not the case in our past life. But I can also understand. After all, in our past life, I wholeheartedly obeyed him and never contradicted him. Yet in this life, I have openly developed conflicts with him. Kevin is an extreme egoist. He absolutely does not allow even the slightest mistake to occur. So, he publicly distanced himself from me just to let everyone know that whatever I say or do in the future is merely the result of my anger and humiliation after being rejected. I hadn't said anything yet. Clara hurriedly said, "You must never cling to Kevin." I ignored her and instead looked at Kevin and asked again, "Are you sure you want to distance yourself from me?" Kevin frowned at me and said, "We have never had any relationship at all." I nodded. "So that's how it is." Since that's the case, I have no need to show any courtesy. On the day the urban return quotas were announced, Kevin was full of vigor. He couldn't wait for everyone to know this news. Clara proudly came up to me and said, "Kevin is going back to the city. You can no longer cling to him." I looked at Clara with sarcasm. "Are you sure this urban return quota belongs to him?" Several passers-by nearby immediately gathered around, curious upon hearing this. Not far away, Kevin, as if he had anticipated this, said leisurely, "Returning to the city is always by designated quota. Are you suggesting that this is something you gave to me?" I nodded. "Indeed, I gave it to you." With a puff, everyone present burst into laughter. A female educated youth who had a relatively good relationship with me before smiled and said, "Who doesn't know that you had a falling out with Kevin recently? How could you possibly give your quota to him?" Clara also smugly smiled and said, "The urban return quota isn't something you can just give away. Stop talking nonsense." Kevin shook his head and said, "I originally thought you would hold back a bit, considering how I took care of you before, but I didn't expect you to be so stubborn." As he spoke, he said to the detachment leader, "After I return, I hope my points can all be credited to Clara's account. To be honest, she is my cousin." Once those words were spoken, everyone looked at Clara with envy. If Kevin were to have any fortune upon returning to the city, Clara would surely benefit. Life in the countryside is already difficult, and Kevin is hinting that the remaining educated youth are pushing me out. I pinched my thigh and cried out to them, "This spot was meant for me." After saying that, I turned and ran away. No one cared about me, as everyone was busy sending Kevin off to the city. Especially Clara, whose big, watery eyes were already red from crying. Everyone thought she was reluctant to part with Kevin. Only I know that Clara is reluctant to part with her appearance. She fears that disfigurement will lead to other unknown consequences, but she has no other choice but this path. I hid in the shadows, watching Clara take a sharp branch and slash at her flower-like face. Just as she was about to faint from the pain, I raised a stone and knocked her unconscious. Then, I swapped our clothes and pushed her into a concealed wild boar pit. Next, I smeared my face with pollen. In less than a while, I developed a severe allergic reaction. Fortunately, it only changes the appearance and causes blisters, and it won't endanger life. As night fell, footsteps drew near. Kevin grabbed me and said, "Hurry up, Clara! The villagers are coming to look for people, and there's no one guarding the mountain road right now. It's best to run at this time." I slowly smiled. "Okay." He looked at me suspiciously and said, "Why does your voice sound a bit hoarse?" I deliberately lowered my voice. "I caught a bit of a cold." After running for several hours, we finally reached the highway. When we arrived in the brightly lit city, Kevin finally noticed that my face was severely swollen and even appeared to be oozing pus. He took a step back in disgust, forcing himself to ask, "How did you make your face look like this?" I mimicked Clara's posture and hid in his arms. "Last night, Sarah deliberately threw a wasp's nest into my room. Boo-hoo-hoo tilde." Kevin immediately gritted his teeth. "That damn Sarah!" He pulled out a large pile of things. "These are all from Sarah's parents. They know I would look for a chance to rescue you these past few days, and they've already told the neighbors that a cousin from the countryside would come to visit." "You will be that cousin then." Among this pile of things were the watch that Dad couldn't bear to wear, as well as the gold ring and gold necklace that Mom couldn't bear to wear. Kevin smiled and said he wanted to sell these things for money, and I smiled back, saying, "Let's keep them for now. After all, you still need to impress your superiors to climb up the ranks, right?" Kevin smiled wryly. "You really are clever." It was evident that Kevin wanted to do something else, but when he saw my pus-filled face, he instantly lost interest. The next morning, my parents held me in their arms, tears streaming down their faces. "You finally came." The familiar neighbors did not understand why my parents were crying so sadly while holding a disfigured niece, but they also offered comforting words. Kevin was just about to talk about his desire to enroll in medical school when the door was kicked open with a bang. Dirty Clara threw herself into Kevin's arms. "Cousin, it's me." Everyone was startled by this unexpected guest. Parents looked at Kevin in shock. "Is this your cousin?" Kevin stared wide-eyed, his gaze fixed on me. But Clara and I are about the same size and in the same state of disfigurement. It's impossible to tell us apart. I walked over to Kevin with tears in my eyes. "Who is this?" Kevin immediately explained anxiously. "I don't know who she is. I don't recognize her." Clara cried out, "Cousin, it's me, Clara. Didn't you say you would come to pick me up when you returned to the city? Why haven't you come to get me?" Dad's gaze instantly fell on Kevin, and the pressure was obvious. I could almost guess how Kevin had talked to my parents. It was probably just about how we were in love, and he swore he would treat me well and similar things. But now, this suddenly emerging cousin will surely arouse my parents' suspicion. I looked at my mother with grievance. My face hurt so much. Tears slid down my face, the irritated wounds burning with pain. Of course, my parents knew that I have been allergic to pollen since childhood, but Kevin didn't know. He only knew that someone was trying to sabotage his plan. So, Kevin didn't think twice and slapped Clara, saying, "What nonsense are you talking? I don't have any cousin." Clara instantly widened her eyes, looking at Kevin in disbelief. "I am Clara. Don't you recognize me?" Clara touched the unhealed wound on her face, crying out, "You made me scar my face! I listened to you, but why did you suddenly abandon me?" Clara cried out in anguish. Even Kevin showed a hint of hesitation on his face. Seeing this, I immediately walked up to Kevin and whispered in his ear, "Cousin, she must be the real Sarah. She must have escaped." Afraid Kevin wouldn't believe me, I added, "After that night, I was still pregnant with your child." Kevin looked up in disbelief, and I nodded at him, saying, "With this child, the Zhao family will surely do everything to support you. This true Sarah must disappear." As soon as these words were spoken, Kevin's eyes revealed a fierce light. People can lose their reason in the face of enormous interests. Moreover, I have thrown out such a big bait. Seeing that my parents' expressions were somewhat unpleasant, Kevin immediately stepped forward to declare, I really don't know this woman. Whatever Clara, whatever cousin has nothing to do with me. Clara still wanted to say something, but Kevin raised his hand and slapped her, causing her to bleed from the corner of her mouth and leaving her unable to speak. Dad was shocked by his ruthlessness, while Mom hesitated and said, no matter who it is, let's not resort to violence. Kevin sighed and said, this Clara always bullies Sarah and has slandered me several times. I simply cannot tolerate it any longer, which is why I had to confront her. As soon as they heard that Clara had bullied me, my parents' expressions immediately changed. Going down to the countryside was meant to solve employment issues. Since this Clara is truly so bad, why not just hand her over to the organization for handling? Upon hearing this, Clara immediately began shaking her head frantically. She had gone through countless hardships to escape from the village, and she had not yet reunited with her cousin. She absolutely could not be captured by the organization. Kevin was overjoyed, but still forced a smile as he said, in the village, I'm the only one who got the urban return quota. This Clara probably escaped. Sending her back would count as a merit. As he spoke, Kevin quickly ran to the public phone booth to make a report. Clara wanted to speak, but Kevin covered her mouth with a rag. Clara's eyes were red from crying, yet she still couldn't utter a word. I scoffed coldly in my heart. In her past life, when she impersonated me and absorbed the benefits from my parents to sustain herself and Kevin, she should have known that it's not that there's no retribution, but that the time has not yet come. Having been reborn, I will no longer be soft-hearted. Being soft-hearted towards the enemy is cruelty towards oneself. Since she has been thinking about Kevin, this cousin, then I will personally let her beloved cousin send her back to hell. To prevent Clara from escaping, I thoughtfully took out a thick hemp rope. After finishing the call, Kevin immediately started tying her up. His movements so swift, it was as if he had practiced it 1,000 times. The neighbors watching the commotion felt a twinge of pity. Everyone knew how severe the punishment would be for the educated youth who escaped only to be sent back, yet no one dared to intervene. I looked at Clara and sighed, pretending to be innocent as I said to Kevin, Brother Kevin, do you think Clara will get beaten when she is sent back? Kevin glanced coldly at Clara. Everything is her own fault. Tears of regret slid down Clara's face. She didn't understand why Kevin suddenly disowned her, nor did she understand why another woman was suddenly standing beside Kevin. I slowly smiled at Clara, looking like a wicked villain. Suddenly, it seemed like Clara understood something and began to struggle violently, but she was tightly bound. Even her mouth was gagged. The person Kevin contacted finally arrived. It was the detachment leader. Upon seeing the detachment leader, Clara trembled in fear. It seemed she had endured much torment during her escape. Until now, Kevin still hasn't realized that Clara is the one he truly wants to spend his life with. I secretly smiled. It seems Kevin's love is nothing more than this. The detachment leader exchanged a few pleasantries with Kevin before preparing to take Clara away. The few of them worked together to lift Clara onto the cart, and Clara seized the opportunity to remove the cloth stuffed in her mouth, shouting, Cousin, I am Clara! She is Sarah! She is Sarah! Kevin stared in disbelief, looking at me with suspicion. What did she say? I tilted my head towards Kevin. She said she is Clara. Kevin's lips quivered. No, the other sentence. I smiled strangely. She said I am Sarah. With that, the conversation ended. Kevin suddenly looked at Clara. He suddenly remembered that what he had instructed Clara was always to mutilate her face, never any other trick. He couldn't help but feel a chilling fear, yet he dared not confirm it. I leaned into Kevin's ear, whispering like a demon, Cousin, if she is Clara, then who am I? Kevin was so frightened that he took a big step back. The people around frowned in confusion. Sarah isn't still being reformed in the countryside? Yes, moreover, Sarah is Professor Zhao's daughter. How could he possibly not recognize his own daughter? Sarah seems to be 2 sizes bigger than this girl and a bit shorter too. This is clearly not Sarah. I was sent to the countryside when I was 16, and now 2 or 3 years have passed. It's normal for my figure to change a bit, but the neighbors don't think so. Because I have always been seen as a chubby child since I was little. Now, After a few years of living in the countryside, not only am I as thin as a straw, but my skin has also turned a healthy wheat color. I am simply unrecognizable. My parents timely remarked, "How could I not know what my daughter looks like?" Sarah has always been a chubby little girl, especially since she has been sent to the countryside to work. She even wrote me a letter last month. This girl is now my niece. She is definitely not Sarah. After this exchange, the neighbors nodded in agreement. Only Kevin remained frozen in place. Suddenly, Kevin seemed to discover something and crawled over to the spot where Clara had just been standing. He trembled as he picked up a worn-out pouch. This is something Clara has always worn. I knowingly asked, "What is this? Isn't this Clara's thing?" Kevin suddenly raised his head, his pupils trembling. "Who are you?" I smiled. "Who am I? Don't you know?" My parents noticed that my expression was not quite right and wanted to send the neighbors away. But I suddenly shouted, "I am Sarah." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was stunned, and then they began to discuss among themselves. Sarah? No way. Sarah shouldn't be in the countryside for re-education, right? She must have escaped back, right? I really thought she was some niece. Tisk tisk tisk, does that mean she will also be taken back to the countryside? Upon receiving my confirmation, Kevin's eyes instantly turned red, as if he were about to bleed. But I pretended not to see. Clara has already said it countless times. She is Clara. What good does it do to glare at me now if you don't believe it yourself? Kevin gritted his teeth and said, "I will make you pay for this." At this point, he understood that there was no longer any possibility of using my parents. After all, what he had done to me was not something that could be easily brushed aside. Kevin turned around intending to call the authorities, planning to have me taken back to the countryside as well. My parents were suddenly anxious, but I calmly raised my hand to stop them. The neighbors couldn't report me, but they also couldn't ignore what was happening, so they just watched as Kevin turned to go to the phone booth. But before he could reach for the phone, a stern voice called out to him, "No need. Our team will personally come to catch people." The newcomer, dressed in uniform, had a solemn and dignified demeanor that made it difficult for anyone to speak casually. Kevin glared at me with resentment, gritting his teeth and saying, "Sarah is a rural reform worker who returned home without organizational permission. I demand severe punishment." I nodded with interest. Returning home without permission should indeed be punished, but the one who deserves punishment is not me, it's you. Kevin scoffed. "I have legitimately obtained the urban return quota." I looked at him with sarcasm. "Oh? Is that so?" Kevin confidently looked at me and said, "The documents for my return to the city are all stamped with official seals. It's not as simple as you say." After he finished speaking, he grabbed the visitor's wrist and said, "Quickly take this Sarah back to the countryside. Make her finish planting 8 acres of land by herself." In the scorching summer sun, expecting me to plant 8 acres of land by myself is simply asking for me to die from the heat. My parents were shocked by his cruel intentions and reproached him with deep sorrow, saying, "Didn't you repeatedly claim to love our Sarah so much? Is this your love?" My parents were unaware of Kevin's schemes, thinking I was merely betrayed by my lover. I looked coldly at Kevin and said, "Oh." Kevin urged, "Hurry up! If you don't act now, Sarah will run away." I smiled. "Do you think I plan to run?" Kevin looked at me stiffly. In the next second, cold handcuffs were suddenly fastened around Kevin's wrists. Kevin raised his head in disbelief. "What do you mean?" I looked at the person who acted and said, "He forced me to give him the credit for my bravery, and in front of everyone, he also molested me. I demand that he be arrested immediately." Kevin immediately shouted angrily, "What nonsense are you talking? Shut up!" The team leader glared at Kevin. "Shut up! You have no right to speak here." Turning around, the team leader gently said to me, "Thank you for saving my children. The moment they woke up, they told me it was a beautiful sister who saved them. Later, when you wrote to me, I thought the child had made a mistake. I didn't expect that you were coerced and tempted. Truly, human hearts are hard to fathom." Saying this, he shot a disdainful glance at Kevin. "I never expected that you, a grown man, would actually want to take credit for a little girl's achievement." Kevin shouted angrily. The urban return quota was earned by my own efforts. You must be protecting each other. You are colluding in secret. Who doesn't know that Sarah's parents are officials? This is all your conspiracy, he eagerly said to the team leader. That day, your two twins went to the pond to pick up the kite. The one in blue fell into the water first, and the one in red slipped and fell in after. I can remember every moment of that day. You can't wrongfully accuse me like this, he cried out in a mournful voice as if he had been wronged. I smiled at him. Since that's the case, I'll make sure you die understanding. With a creak, two old men walked out from behind the tightly closed door. I smiled and stepped forward. You just need to tell me what you saw that day. Kevin was at a loss. One of the elderly men said, That day we were fishing by the pond. It was too hot. So we huddled in the grass to cool off, and suddenly we saw a child fall in. The child in the red clothes fell in first. The child in the blue clothes was pulled into the water while trying to save the other child, and then a girl in green clothes saved the two children. During this time, no one else appeared. As they spoke, they pointed at the clothes I was wearing and said, It's this outfit. Upon hearing this, the team leader nodded affirmatively and said, It's exactly the same as what my child said, with no differences at all. Until now, Kevin only realized that all the details I told him were actually wrong, but he still didn't give up. Kevin gritted his teeth and said, It's been so long, it's normal for me to remember it wrong. Who doesn't know that you've always had a crush on me? It's just that I never accepted you, so you've held a grudge and deliberately tried to slander me. Kevin's voice grew louder, trying to convince himself as well. I coldly glanced at Kevin and turned to the two elders. Have you ever seen me take the initiative to approach Kevin, besides being the village elders and supervising work? Both of them shook their heads. Kevin glared fiercely. Their one-sided account cannot be trusted at all. The two elderly men snorted coldly and took out their credentials, saying, We are public officials and would never speak nonsense. In my past life, Kevin went to great lengths to get close to me, sending gifts and trying to win my favor. Otherwise, I wouldn't have inexplicably developed such deep feelings for him. But whenever I tried to get close to Kevin, he would refuse me on the grounds of avoiding suspicion. In my past life, I thought he was looking out for me. Now I realize that Kevin simply found me distasteful. Now I am very grateful for Kevin's disdain. The two old men glanced at Kevin and turned to the team leader, saying, All along it has been Kevin who took the initiative to approach Sarah. Sarah never made the first move. Last month, while Kevin was harvesting wheat, he acted inappropriately towards Sarah, and since then, they have completely severed ties. The team leader nodded and turned to Kevin. Do you have anything to say? Whether it was the testimonies of the villagers or those of the two rescued individuals, all proved that Kevin was lying. At this point, there was nothing Kevin could do to turn the tide. Yet he still refused to admit his fault, shouting that he was not at fault. Seeing this, the team leader was at a loss for words and could only announce with a cold face that the person should be taken back. He even announced on the spot that the urban return quota was reserved for self-sacrificing heroes. And I was that hero. The neighbors all knew that I was rightfully returning to the city, and finally no one discussed this matter anymore. My parents felt sorry for my face and also for all the suffering I had endured. Looking at my parents still living well, I didn't feel any bitterness at all. Allergies are just a minor issue. Taking medicine can resolve it. Moreover, medical advancements are significant now, and scars are just a small matter. What I didn't expect was that the two children I saved were actually genius students in abacus mental calculation, with minds comparable to large computers. No wonder the organization specifically rewarded me with an urban return quota. Although the art of mental abacus has declined in later generations, in this era, it is still a highly respected discipline. So many people have begun to praise my act of bravery. 2 years have passed, and my appearance has completely returned to normal. Through my own efforts, I joined the cultural troupe and successfully took on the job I loved. I wrote appeals for help for the impoverished. I wrote praise poems for the kind-hearted. I wrote about the joy of harvest for the working people, shining in my own position. Many people thank me, and there are also many who say I am the ink and brush of the people. Not only that, but I also took out an advertisement seeking doctors who could help my father with his heart bypass surgery. I saved my own father, and I also helped many others. Thinking back to my past life, Kevin said that the major I studied was completely useless, and I found it amusing. I heard he was sentenced to 8 years of forced labor, and after he was released, he was directly sent back to the countryside to continue his re education. Clara had been waiting in the village for Kevin. As soon as Kevin returned to the village, he was set ablaze by the frenzied Clara. This incident was reported by my colleague. When talking about them, my colleague shuddered and said, "It is said that the death was horrific. The woman held onto the man tightly, and they were burned to a crisp together." My colleague did not know who the two people were on the report, only that they were the victims. Looking at the two names quietly lying on the manuscript, the pent-up feeling in my heart finally dissipated completely. In the future, I will still walk the path that belongs to me, and they are destined to be submerged in the dust of history.